Ever picked up an ancient text and wondered, what in the world does this have to do with my life today? Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We are diving deep into the book of Leviticus to unlock the meaning behind its ancient laws and festivals.
So let's just cut to the chase. Why should any of us care about these, super old purity laws and harvest festivals? Are they just dusty relics from a bygone era, or is there something much, much deeper going on here?
Here's how we're going to tackle that. First, we'll look at this whole idea of holiness, what it meant for priests and the sacrifices they made. Then, we're going to walk through Israel's sacred calendar, from the spring feasts all the way to the fall feasts. And then, we'll put all the pieces together to see the incredible big picture.
All right, let's jump right in. First up, the world of the priests. The rules they had to follow were incredibly specific, and for a really good reason. They were all about understanding how to approach a holy God.
Okay, so the text gets super specific here. Things like certain skin diseases or even touching a dead body would make a priest unclean. This meant they couldn't eat the holy offerings. Now, this wasn't really about modern hygiene. It was a powerful physical symbol of the need for spiritual purity.
And these rules created a really clear distinction. Only the priest and his immediate family and household could eat these sacred meals. If you were a guest, a visitor, a hired worker, sorry, you were on the outside looking in. It was a very real way of setting God's chosen servants apart.
And get this, if you messed up, even by accident, the consequence was pretty severe. You had to repay the full value of what you ate plus a 20% penalty. It's a powerful reminder of just how seriously this was all taken.
And here, we really get to the absolute heart of it. The reason all the animal sacrifices had to be perfect, without any blemish, it wasn't just a random rule. According to the source, every single one was a symbol, a preview, pointing forward to the ultimate perfect sacrifice. So with that idea of sacrifice in mind, let's see how it gets woven into the rhythm of Israel's entire year. Their sacred calendar always kicked off with this incredible burst of festivals in the spring, and every single one was just packed with meaning. This timeline really shows you how jam-packed the beginning of the year was. It all starts in the first month with Passover on the 14th day. That's immediately followed by a whole week of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then, 50 days later, you get the Feast of Weeks. It's a rapid-fire series of events. It all starts with Passover. You know, the foundational story of Israel's freedom, where the blood of a lamb saved them from slavery. And as the source material really emphasizes, this incredible act of redemption was a vivid picture of an even greater sacrifice that was still to come. Then, just a couple of days after Passover, you have the Feast of First Fruits. The high priest would take the very first cutting of the barley harvest and wave it before the Lord. It's presented as this powerful symbol of resurrection, the first sign that a much bigger harvest was on its way. Then, 50 days later, the spring cycle wraps up with the Feast of Weeks, which you might know as Pentecost. This was all about joy, a celebration of the harvest coming in. And amazingly, this is the very day that the New Testament says the Holy Spirit arrived, kicking off a whole new kind of spiritual harvest. So, after a long, quiet summer, the festival calendar picks right back up in the 7th month. And it does so with 3 final, really profound feasts that shift the mood from new beginnings to some very serious atonement, and then, ultimately, to joy. First up was the Day of Atonement. This was, without a doubt, the most solemn day of the entire year. It was the one and only day the high priest could go behind the curtain into the most holy place to make things right for the sins of the entire nation. It was a day of fasting and deep reflection. But then, talk about a complete 180. Just 5 days later, the mood totally flips for the Feast of Tabernacles. This was a week-long party. It was about remembering their 40 years in the desert, thanking God for his protection through it all, and celebrating the final harvest of the year. And here's where it gets really beautiful. During this week, people would live in these little temporary shelters or booths. It was like living inside a story. A physical reminder that God was right there with them in the wilderness, and it was also a promise of a future day when he would dwell with his people forever. So, when you put it all together, you start to see something incredible. These aren't just separate rules and random holidays. They're all pieces of one giant puzzle. They're like shadows that point to a much greater reality.
Think about the Passover lamb, for example. The source explains that the rule about it being perfect, completely without any blemish, that wasn't just some fussy detail.
It was a living, breathing symbol, a shadow that finds its true meaning, its ultimate fulfillment in the perfect, blemish-free sacrifice of Christ.
And it's the same idea with the Feast of Tabernacles, that act of God living with his people in temporary shelters while they traveled through the wilderness.
Well, that becomes this powerful picture of the final promise we read about in Revelation, a time when God's home will be with humanity, forever.
So we're left with this question. What happens when you stop seeing this ancient calendar as just an old list of expired rules, and you start seeing it as a pattern, a blueprint, a shadow of a reality that was always meant to come? It suggests that history isn't just a series of random events. It's a story, carefully told, where every single detail was a signpost pointing the way.